Hey guys, Level Cap here. Today I want to talk about the most discussed feedback issues with Battlefield 5's alpha. The alpha does not represent the final version of Battlefield 5 gameplay, but we're less than 4 months away from launch and there's frankly a lot of work to be done. Delivering well-discussed and dissected feedback into the hands of the developers is crucial to help them focus their efforts on what needs to change before this game ships. So let's get into the most popular topics. Possibly one of the more one-sided bits of feedback in the alpha is in regard to the massive amounts of visual clutter. DICE has a history of trying to constantly integrate every possible particle effect and visual styling option available into each of their Battlefield games. Currently, Battlefield 5 suffers from an ever-present snowstorm that even exists inside many buildings, extremely dark interiors, and dark light transitions that create solid black environments in which it's literally impossible to see your enemies. New ammo pickup animations that block a portion of the screen and will trigger mid-firefight, a new wave of UI rewards that also activate during combat to further obstruct your vision, and finally an incredibly bright and blinding sun that is making its return back from the Battlefield 3 glory days. The result of all these new features is a theatrically rendered game that sacrifices gameplay for visual presentation. No doubt this will be used to make the game look sexy and marketable in trailers, but in practice the visual clutter is extremely frustrating. With all these elements on screen at once, plus the return of soldier AD movement spam, tracking enemies mid-firefight can become a bit of a joke. Hopefully DICE gets the message and can make some big changes before launch. Regardless, it is frustrating to see DICE making the exact same changes they've made before and giving the exact same feedback I have or we have in the past. Now next up on the hot topics list is a bit more controversial argument about the much faster time to kill, often referred to as TTK. For anyone jumping into Battlefield 5 having only played Battlefield 1, you might be surprised by the speed at which you are now able to drop your opponents. However, if you're a veteran of Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, or Battlefield Hardline days, then the Battlefield 5 time to kill will feel quite familiar. The current debate is that the faster TTK allows for more camping, less time to react to your enemies, and deaths that seem to occur in 1 or 2 frames with no time to react. The other side of the argument for faster time to kill is that it allows for a more realistic feeling of combat, an emphasis on peaking and reaction time, and greater power to the individual player. I for one have always argued for a faster time to kill in Battlefield games because of the sheer size and pacing of the title. The slower time to kill of Battlefield 1 often forces me into fire, retreat, reload cycles, which slows down combat and gives my enemies ample time to react to my flanks. I cherish a return to the faster pacing of Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, and I hope DICE holds their ground with the current model. What do you guys think? A few years back, I made a super in-depth video talking about time to kill and the philosophies behind high time to kill and low time to kill and why they benefit in different games and why there's no one solution fits all for all first-person shooters. And I still stand by a lot of the things I said in that video, and I think it definitely applies to Battlefield 5. If you want to check it out, I'll put a link for that in the description. The next hot topic, perhaps one of the most widely discussed topics, is the new attrition system, which has led to a lot of people running out of ammo mid-firefight. Sure, it's the early days of the alpha and people are still adapting to new mechanics, but a lot of players are upset with the extremely limited starting ammo. For example, the assault class starts with only 2 magazines for their primary weapon. This allows for very little flexibility and often leaves players high and dry after netting a kill or 2. You do, however, now have an option to top off your ammo supply with the help of support classes, but even then you can only carry 3 full magazines instead of just 2. This is the difference of 60 rounds or 90 rounds. The attrition system mechanics are interesting, but also quite punishing if you don't have smart and active support players assisting every flank in battle. I think DICE should bump the starting ammo count to 3 magazines instead of just 2 and continue testing from there. I actually really like the bigger emphasis on logistics, but I think they may have made it too punishing of a system in its current state. The running joke in Battlefield games is that the support classes are usually oblivious to their obligations and you can spend minutes chasing them around requesting ammo without ever getting any. To put a bigger emphasis on the ammo distribution really isn't going to change the way that support players play the game, but instead will cause players to run out of ammo just a lot more frequently. I think the flaw with DICE's thinking here is that if they put a huge emphasis and punish players for not having ammo and reward players a lot for distributing ammo, it'll somehow change the gameplay fundamentally. But the problem here is that distributing ammo is not necessarily a fun gameplay mechanic. It's just a necessary gameplay mechanic, and Battlefield very much is about having fun. Lots of players hop into this game as novices or casual players, don't understand the underlying logistical mechanics of the game particularly well, and then when you've got support players in your squad, they're just not doing their job. This happens all the time, and that's okay. Battlefield is a large-scale, casually oriented game, and DICE just has to change their thinking about on what they can expect in a massive 64-player casual game. You just have to assume that most of those players are not going to have a really good, really in-depth understanding of the logistics system, and you really shouldn't punish players for having bad teammates, which is what the current system does. This approach makes more sense in smaller scale games like 5v5s, like Overwatch or something like that, where you can have matchmaking where it's going to team you up with players of similar or equal skill. But in Battlefield games where it's matching good players with bad players and everybody into one server, this can be very frustrating. And so putting a bigger emphasis on having team play mechanics working every time for everybody to have a good, enjoyable experience, I think is a bit of a flawed approach. The next hot topic is a bit of a compounded issue. It starts off with the new bleed out system causing a bit of a fuss. Instead of allowing players to quickly return to the spawn screen after death, you now have a bleed out system in which you can let your soldier lose blood quicker, which still takes a while, or you can hold your wound and call for a medic, prolonging your down but not out state, and hopefully give a nearby medic enough time to reach you. The problem with this system is that either option usually leaves you with a lot of time spent staring at nothing and waiting to return to the spawn screen. The system is further exacerbated by the squad spawn screen, which is the first screen you will see upon death if your squad mates are still alive. The squad spawn screen does not really display a big overhead map, nor does it allow you to switch classes, limiting your tactical choices or your tactical thinking. Most players, myself included, are preferring the standard deployment screen instead. So now after a long bleed out sequence, I then also have to back out of the squad spawn menu, creating an annoying extra step I never had to deal with before. There's no question about it, the new bleed out and squad spawn systems are slow and clunky. The main point of the new bleed out system is to allow more time for medics to revive you, but it's hard to say if it's actually worth it in exchange for extremely boring death waiting screens. Hopefully they can do something to allow for further planning or activities from the bleed out screen while you wait. The next hotly debated topic revolves around airplanes and their seemingly pointless existence. The abolition of 3D spotting has left pilots with basically no way to pinpoint ground targets consistently. The speckled black and white landscape makes it near impossible to spot infantry movement from the sky, and the sluggish plane controls make lining up targets even more difficult. Players have gone from getting thrashed by airplanes in Battlefield 1 to never even being killed by them once in hours and hours of playing Battlefield 5. Half of the community seems to be fine with the new plane nerfs, as they don't want a repeat of Battlefield 1's terrible attack plane and strategic bomber ground domination. And frankly, who can blame them? The strategic bomber exploits of Battlefield 1 have left people, myself included, with a severe mistrust of DICE's ability to create fun gameplay mechanics when it comes to balancing air and ground combat, and most people seem to feel fine thinking that air will have little to no impact on ground battles at all. Of course, I would like to see air versus ground combat to evolve in a meaningful way, but without 3D spotting, it's hard to imagine how DICE is going to do this effectively. Now, there's a ton of other feedback on the forums. I think a lot of the other feedback is also very important, but certainly these are some of the most hotly discussed topics right now. Some of the other smaller issues, I wouldn't call them smaller issues, but less debated issues are like quality of life things like clunky animations, revive animations being super clunky and weird. Having animations for everything in the game now often leads to weird, clunky situations. The new spotting system that auto marks people out is a little bit weird and still spots people through particle effects and smoke. There's lots of other little things going on there, and I recommend checking out the feedback forums for yourself and weighing in on debates, especially if you've played the alpha. If you haven't played the alpha, maybe hold off for a bit. I'm sure DICE will be doing a bunch more alphas and betas before launch. But it's important to sort of weigh in, take note, put your arguments down there in writing, and let the developers figure out what they want to do with the game for launch. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think about all these issues in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.